That's something that you're more used to and you know the difficulty level, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, we can handle this, and you haven't done it in a while, so you don't actually know exactly what the feel is. So it does need to be just as rehearsed as any key when you are racing, because you're not racing just against a clock here to get the loot. As you said, you're racing against another team. Now here's that big pull that we expected to see, that Guardian Druid going pretty far here. It doesn't, okay, he's taking a huge amount of damage.
Now keep in mind, we have changed affixes now. We're no longer in that teaming world. We now have Sanguine, Quaking, and Tyrannical, of course, is still here. So what that Quaking does for those at home, when you see that gray circle pop up, oh, that's not good. So what happens, we do have a death here over on UC Irvine with this big pull. Luckily, he is pulled back up immediately. A wipe would be absolutely devastating here, so they want to make sure to res immediately and keep DPSing. The reason you're seeing the kiting around in circles, of course, is because now we have that Sanguine debuff coming out with the affix. What that means is when a mob dies, it will drop these kind of purple poop puddles that you see on the ground. Any player that steps into them will take damage over time. However, also, Rich, of course, any enemy that steps into them will be healed for a substantial amount per second.
Poop, definitely bad here. We actually see the boomkin for UC Irvine popping Incarnation there. And I think the big thing is if your warrior goes down and you're going to lose all that damage, going into Incarn and kind of picking up that slack is the right play. Incarn very strong here on Rockmora to have it instantly. They skip right through this RP though, ultimately. Now they are going to be working on Rockmora. CSUC has just jumped down and they have a little while to go, but they were a little bit cleaner on that trash, although be it slower, they did not pick up that death there. But UC Irvine able to jump back very quickly. That's one of those things where you're like, okay, I get to drop Ravager and pop all my cooldowns and just watch the numbers, and sometimes you just get slapped right in the face for it.
And then watch the tank kite it out because kite it out of your Ravager because of Sanguine. So important, of course, here on Rockmora that we were discussing earlier. Every Skitter or Live, some of those small mobs will add damage to Rockmora's AoE stomp ability. So it's important to get those down. Those are spawned based on the damage done to Rockmora. It's important to get those down prior to a stomp. He also does have a frontal that you want to be wary of. And of course, every time you kill a Skitter, they will leave one of those green pools on the ground. So it's important for players to slowly move around the room. You can see one of those stomps there doing devastating damage to the group. And there was no Skitter alive during that. So very well done by them to make sure that they rock on and kill those mobs.
Another thing I want to point out too, if you actually look at the damage respectively for each of these groups, you can see that CSUC is doing more single target damage here than we're getting out of UC Irvine. A big reason for this is CSUC got to hang on to a lot of their cooldowns. You have both of those marksmanship hunters using the volley for the AoE instead of using some of their bigger cooldowns, and they get to save them, use them here on the boss, and that's why it took them a little bit longer to bring down Trash, but this is Tyrannical.
I think we are seeing a substantial difference in some of the makeup in damage, though. From you can see Shakib is sustaining about 1 million over here on UC Irvine. In the meantime, CSUC's tank is doing about 600k range, so there's a bit of damage caught up as a result for UC Irvine, who is just now reaching sub 10% on Rockmora and should be able to down the boss in a moment. Meanwhile, CSUC also doing a very clean job, just nearing that last quarter of health for Rockmora as well.
Yeah, they were further behind, though, when they actually did pull Rockmora, so their damage is going to be able to catch them up, but as you mentioned, Shakib is just able to do so much damage.
Now, what I like here, Rich, and you and I talk about this all the time, what a CSUC is doing is they're pulling Rockmora to the to the exit of the area, so that when Rockmora dies, they're closer to those barrels, leaving them down the river. I was surprised to see UC Irvine, especially with the experience coming out of Shakib, that they killed Rockmora a fair ways away from the exit, leading them to lose a few valuable seconds, probably about 5 to 7 seconds, having to run over to those further barrels.
And right now you are going to see some of those movement buffs getting popped on the side of CSUC so they can get to those barrels even faster after they already have kited towards them. Now this is a big moment for UC Irvine. This is always the pull that we kind of wait to see how they handle it. Are they going to run up and actually start to kite these mobs here? Oh, they're going all the way here. I don't think they're going to run away either.
Keep getting pretty low too. Luckily pops back up. Now these Hulks are very dangerous. They do have that fracture frontal, after which they'll cast these piercing shards. If nobody interrupts it, which they didn't, it is a ton of damage extra on the tank. Luckily Shakib probably uses Empower Wards there to absorb some of that damage, get an increase in agility percent. They down the mobs quite quickly. Excellent damage by everyone, and they'll be moving on to Allarog's area, which they'll need to clear a substantial amount of trash out of before engaging Allarog. In the meantime, we do see CSUC. They are pulling that second drummer on the side, so they're moving just a bit slower here than UC Irvine.
UC Irvine's pull, if you did on anything but a 14, you would probably wipe. You would see like everybody actually jump away. Those pelters jumping away. They'd start to chuck raid damage out left and right. That was the perfect amount of time. And when you've talked about this quite a bit here at the TESPA Dungeon Race, the idea of how much CC you actually have, how much damage you actually have in this 14 without a fortified, they're able to get it down before the pelters can jump away and start doing real damage here. So really knowing how much they're going to be able to pull out, and I think we're going to see that dictate a lot of their pulls.
David doing a good job there, of course, punting that breaker out of the Sanguine pool earlier as Shakib runs over and pulls the Hulk with the remaining, what I would assume is probably the rest of the trash they're going to clear here. Nick getting very low, lots of avalanche damage coming out from that breaker. They don't feel the need to kite just yet. It looks like they'll be okay. They should be able to clear up this trash. In the meantime, CSUC only now moving up to that first Hulk that earlier UC Irvine combined with the rest of the trash, so they're just moving a substantial amount slower than UC Irvine. Both teams are executing very well, but UC Irvine, Rich, we talk about this all the time, they're just pulling more and executing it better.
Yeah, that's the big thing. CSUC, they haven't lost a series yet, but all of a sudden they're up against absolute Goliaths here, and we'll have to see if they can make up time. I think UC Irvine's playing against themselves in a sense because they're going for much riskier strats. If they slip up at one point, they only have the one death right now, but that last pull could have gotten out of hand. But we should pay a little bit of attention to Allarog. Keep in mind, they haven't pulled all of the trash, so during the shell game phase that we're about to see, that we'll talk about in just a second, we actually do see they get pulled over right now, so they're going to have to deal with that on top of the Billowing Idols. They should be able to get out a decent amount of cleave damage, but a lot of damage goes out during this phase as well.
I think that might have been on purpose, but they do have to be very careful where that Shaper dies, because if it dies near the idol that they need to kill, it will drop that Sanguine pool, making it take longer to kill that idol. Looks like they'll be killing it safely on the side, though. Should be all right. They're moving over to what I assume they hopefully know is the correct idol to reveal the boss, after which he will return back to the first phase. Rich, we do know that in that phase there is a Sunder nature damage nuke on the tank. We do have as well some idols spawning that the tank can turn 90 degrees after the first one spawns and spawn them on top of each other for max cleave efficiency, and the ever deadly hands coming up from the ground that if a player is caught within those grasping hands will take massive damage. The boss will enter that phase. It looks like they guessed the wrong idol here. Somebody was not paying attention to the damage. Unfortunately, the damage does ramp up in this phase. As a result, Nick does proc his cheat death, and we're going to have a ton of resources needed from David to keep everyone up.
That's another one that they actually do get wrong, and this is one of the reasons that even if you do control to pull that trash, it can be a huge fallacy because you're paying so much damage to the ad, you're paying so much attention on DPSing it down during this phase that you miss which idol it's in. Finally, they are going to get Allarog out, but in that time, we actually do see the Boomkin go down, and all of a sudden CSUC has been able to pull the boss themselves.
Allarog just hands David a death right there. They'll have to get him up. I'm not sure actually if they have that battle res. I believe it was Druids that they used earlier for that one death, so they have to four-man the rest of this tyrannical boss that takes so long to kill, and it's ever so important to kill this boss earlier to make sure you don't get that extra down phase, which likely they will have for sure now as a result of that DPS death.
Yeah, having that one DPS go down, I mean, we've already seen every time, even on the 14, it is down to the wire whether or not you're going to be able to skip one of those shell phases. Now, they look like they definitely will not be able to. CSUC already 78% through this boss. They're having their first shell phase. This can be enough for them to catch up. That's why I was saying UC Irvine slightly playing against themselves. They go for the risky strategy. They make an error. They can't figure out which one Allarog's actually in. We'll need to see if they can do it here. Now they don't have any extraneous factors to pay attention to because the additional ad that they didn't pull is still inside of that end cap.
Unfortunately for UC Irvine, nobody told them that in order to find the right idol, you do have to play this game with your eyes open. Hopefully they'll be able to fix it up here. In the meantime, CSUC seeming to get it on their first try, no problem. Allarog is back up now in that second phase one for CSUC. In the meantime, Select going down. Nick is now vulnerable. Remember, Nick does not have access to that cheat death. Luckily, he is healed up, but Allarog is at 51%. 2 DPS are dead. There's no option right now to get them. They're opting to reset the boss intelligently, so I think, Rich, because 50% is a lot of health to chew through, and ultimately they could risk dying as well. So we're going to have a full reset from UC Irvine. In the meantime, CSUC now still working on Allarog.
I think that UC Irvine going into this was pretty much everyone's favorite to win, and they are just going to cost themselves right now. They were very far in the lead, but CSUC now in the driver's seat. They have had cautious pulls over and over again, but they haven't made a mistake yet, and now they're going to be able to down Allarog, and they probably don't even need to go to another shell phase. This should be their last one.
This is, and right you are, Rich, this is actually going to be the big test right here. Will they be able to down the remaining 37% of Allarog once he comes up? If they are, that is going to be a huge advantage, because you folks at home see just how long it takes to deal with that idle down phase. By default, it'll take about 30 seconds, regardless if you find the correct one first. So they're going to make sure to DPS as hard as they can, likely popping whatever CDs they have at their disposal at the moment so that they can move past.
Allarog, they are trying to bring it down, as you said, fighting for that shell phase. Allarog pulled on the other side for UC Irvine, and these are the seconds that will matter the most as we zoom in on CSUC. Will Allarog fall before he goes into this next phase? The grasping hands have come out. They managed to dodge that just fine. 5% left. The billowing idols coming out, taking that cleave damage from both the tank and the kitty, but Allarog does fall down. Savage Roar going to come out as they move on to those crocodiles.
Well played. Now, we do know, of course, in a non-teaming setting, it is very easy to avoid this pack by just hugging the left side. You don't actually have to CC, but they do it just to be safe. What I'm very curious about, Rich, is will CSUC pull those Viz'aduums on the side? I hope so, because I hate them and I hope they all die. UC Irvine, in the meantime, working back on Allarog's second phase 1 right now. They will, by default, have another down phase, and the pressure, of course, especially after their shenanigans in the first attempt, will be, will they be able to get him down after this last, what is hopefully for them, last down phase?
This is actually a pretty clean pull that we see coming out from CSUC. Before we actually saw one of these pulls go kind of wrong. They go a little bit too far. They decide to actually line the other room as well. Hunter putting out a misdirect onto those Viz'aduums, as you like to call them. I hate calling them that. And they actually somewhat mispull. They don't get a full group. And this time CSUC, most likely having seen that, know that they're going to go about it a little bit differently, and they're still playing their very safe game. And it's working for them right now, because UC Irvine having that huge mistake here back in this billowing idle phase, and you can see they most likely will be able to do it because CSUC was able to get it down before 35% after an idle. Yeah. So they should be able right now to bring down Allarog, but look at just how far behind they really have become. Yeah,
they're gonna need a really big pull coming up before Nyalaxis, the third boss, in just a moment here. CSUC pulling the last of that trash prior to Nyalaxis, the third boss. Now, Rich, let's talk. Oh, not a very good play there, unfortunately. They do have a stun on the 2 higher health mobs after killing the smaller worms on CSUC side, leading to a ton of sanguine healing as those pools do stack. Luckily, they do use that Ring of Peace to punt them out of that area and get ready to pull Nyalaxis. UC Irvine now just downing, quite safely so, after the second attempt, of course. They do down Allarog. They are going to skip this trash pack, and we'll just have to see just how they pull for Nyalaxis. It will have to be pretty reckless because, Rich, we discussed, I'm sure at this point they know they boo-booed and they know they're behind. So they're going to have to act pretty risky here to make sure that they catch up.
Yeah, you got to correct the boo-boos sometimes. That really is the case. And it is kind of hard, though, when you don't have a Death Knight. Death Knights are really good for correcting boo-boos when you do have Sanguine, because they can actually pull it out of the Sanguine. You can go a little bit faster. I actually would have liked to see an in-cap come out of Shakib there as well. You know, playing it safe after you made the mistake. Massive pool, though, coming here, and you can see it's already a little bit sloppy as CSUC starts to work on Nyalaxis.
They do pull everything there. We have to keep an eye, of course, on those grubs. If that metamorph size comes up, it will transform into a full, devastatingly high HP worm. In the meantime, CSUC dealing well with the mechanics here. I do think one of the Devouts got eaten. No, barely didn't at the end. So what we want to watch out for here, of course, for those at home, is that Nyalaxis will spawn 2 Devouts occasionally. If either of them gets eaten, aka reaches the boss and channels for a bit, the boss will gain a permanent 50% stacking damage buff for the remainder of the encounter. Of course, she does spray a ton of poison out in the area, and as well casts Rancid Maw that puts pools of poison down that slow the target. The key to this is that once Spiked Tongue is cast by the boss at 100 energy, the tank must run away and use those pools to be slowed, especially if you're a slower mobility tank, such as a DK or a Paladin, because if you get eaten, you also will give the boss that 50% buff.
Yeah. So basically, TLDR, watch out for the Zealots. Make sure that we do see those DPS snapping onto them very quickly.
Really close.
This is really close right now. And I was saying this earlier, a lot of the times when you see a Guardian Druid, I like to see them actually use the sprint the first time, the kitty sprint, run away there, then go into tank form. Next time, maybe use something like their Roar, because it's not too far of a run actually back. Sometimes you can do it in the opposite order as well. And right now, you can see the Hunters instantly jumping onto those Devouts before they even get to come to. Yeah. And also, gotta give it up for Snake Boy. This is why we've seen so many Ferals. They don't lose much single target damage to go into their AoE build. It was Snakeboy at the top of the meters for CSUC last time when they went for the pool, but got to pay attention to UC Irvine here. So look, they're starting to get themselves back in it with their massive amounts of damage and their super big pool.
You know, at this point, we do have a 7% trash differential as well that we have to watch out for. And you know, with how close these two teams are, not only will that matter, but UC Irvine also has a 2 death counter over Chico at the moment, so that's an extra 10 seconds that they'll have to overcome in the long run. CSUC dealing with what is likely their last spike tongue phase, of course, with their Guardian Druid running away here. Unfortunately, does collapse over Malvo C there and procs some of that splash damage of the Quake. Luckily, nobody goes down in the meantime. We should see Nyalaxis, however, worming his way down that hole in just a moment as UC Irvine still works towards their last phase of spike tongue.
They've somewhat corrected their boo-boo. I'm not gonna lie, we saw them so far ahead. It's like so far ahead. Cannot stress that. If you're just jumping in right now, we saw UC Irvine like 3 minutes ahead. They go pretty much all of the way through the pool. They do 2 extra idols. They take down 2 extra idols when we actually see that shell game come out. And now all of a sudden, they're still looking like a contender in this. I want to keep my eyes though on CSUC just a little bit. You brought up the Ring of Peace. There's so many interesting things that can come out with a Mistweaver. Ring of Peace isn't even something that I've really thought of that much in PvE recently, and it looked awesome there.
It's really good, yeah, because it's just area denial, so it's excellent as kind of a mini punt or, you know, a mini typhoon, if you will, to move mobs out of those sanguine pools when you have no other choice here. CSUC moving down now, working towards the last of those trash packs, and then we'll be moving on to the last boss, Dartrul, in just a moment here. You know, we do have pelters again in these groups, Rich, and more dangerously, and I'm sure you're no stranger to them, will be those scorpion packs coming up.
Yeah, sometimes you need to stand underneath the spider to try to avoid some of that damage as well. I don't know why I call scorpion spiders. That was an accident, but
I thought they were elephants, but that's fine.
So the big thing as well with CSUC, they have an interesting composition. We're talking about some of the things that they were able to do with the double traps on when they actually did Karazhan, and now as well they're doing interesting things with the Ring of Peace. I want to keep seeing cool stuff come out of CSUC, and I want to see them keep playing safe. I think UC Irvine had somewhat of a throw there. They are still real competitors, but as you already alluded to, they are still struggling in the trash department. That's why they're slightly moving over to the side. I think they may try to go for another big pull here and try to get that massive warrior damage out.
Now, for what it's worth, Rich, and we did comment on this yesterday, we kind of scrutinized it a bit, CSUC will actually have too much trash. They're going to hit 100% here with this next Scorpion, actually about 101%. We're having a massive pull come over here from Irvine. They are not shy at all. They have to be really careful here. Once they kill that trash, they have to move Dartrul out immediately. Otherwise, he will take substantial healing from those sanguine pools. Of course, we do know this Char Skin can also be healed. It is summoned by the boss himself. They'll have to kite it into that wall. Well done indeed. And he will take 100% increased damage for the duration of that stun phase. Scorpions are now going down. Dartrul does need to be moved out of those pools, else he will be healed. Unfortunately, he does have some casting phases. Luckily, it does not land as those sanguines go down. UC Irvine manages to kill all that trash with that massive boss pull, and this is going to be really close. Keep in mind, Irvine has to kill this boss at least 10 seconds faster than CSUC in order to clutch this win.
The other big thing, though, that we actually did see there, and this is too much trash coming in from CSUC. If they didn't have that extra bit of trash, all of a sudden they would be in it. But UC Irvine, against all odds, with that massive pool, has gotten themselves back in this. They're not going to take down that Char Skin just yet. They're waiting just a little bit. But wow, massive damage going to come out on the Hunter, and the tank's going to go down for CSUC. This may be UC Irvine's window to close this one out. They already made the risky play. Now they just need to do the mechanics of Dartrul.
They're going to have actually a full wipe on CSUC. Rich, as you were saying that, I believe actually CSUC did have some trash with them as well. They kind of went in and pulled one of the Scorpion packs with the boss. Unfortunately, it was a bit too much to handle. The tank did get spiked. Totally possible that he did not have his Iron Fern present when that Magma Smash came up from Dartrul. And of course, if the tank does not have the active mitigation during that moment, he will take a substantial more damage and be punted far away. In this case, he was unfortunately one shot and went down. UC Irvine looking like in great control here, but we do know, Rich, that that Magma Wave, when the boss reaches 100 energy, is very devastating. Time and time again, you and I have seen teams choke and wipe at the very last possible moment on this boss.
And we already did see, as strong as UC Irvine has looked with a lot of their trash, we already did see them mess up to a relatively simple mechanic. I mean, I haven't seen a team mess up on that shell game yet. And all of a sudden, a team that was just so far ahead, that's been innovative in a lot of ways, does fall to that. And I think a big reason why was because they actually pulled that trash alongside it. It's hard to split your attention. And that shell game, as funny as it is, it actually requires a huge amount of attention.
Yeah, right, you're right. You know, they have to kill, actually, they're choosing to just CC the Charskin and get this win off on Dartrul. Unfortunately, that is just not enough time left for CSUC to catch up. So despite that mistake that we were talking about, Rich, Irvine will clutch this first win. I mean, that match was looking really close just up until the end. Just one hiccup on either team's side was the deciding factor, and unfortunately, the bigger hiccup, which led to a full wipe, was on CSUC's side. But really, Irvine played it well. They knew they made a mistake on Allarog and decided to go and reset the boss rather than try and play it out, which potentially not only could have risked the wipe, but would have taken
competitors. And now we're jumping into Karazhan. It is going to be the pick of Cal State. Let's see what they can do on this map.
So, like I said here, we're not seeing any skips coming up from either of the teams. It seems that they'll both be running up and dealing with these spirits where, you know, nothing too dangerous. Just make sure we're interrupting them. We're not in a fortified setting right now, but really the biggest danger here comes that it just takes so long to kill one of them. They have a ton of health. They're by themselves. You're not getting any efficient cleave here. Look, the entire team has to park here just to kill this one terror. While in the meantime, we actually do see UC Irvine finally use that mass stealth. So they do buy themselves a fair bit of time by going past this trash. Moving on, oh, we do have a bit of lag behind from Select. I'm not sure if they intended to pull that sentry robot there. Nonetheless, they will have to deal with it while moving on to that nullifier as well.
Still, the thing is, when we actually do talk about efficiency, and you can see it, efficiency not necessarily being a thing that we are seeing on the top portion of your screen, because look, it's just one mob by itself. That's what we saw with the actual Banshees as well. You talk about the idea of efficiency, it's just like, hey, it's not efficient to only work on one mob. For UC Irvine, they are still going to have two mobs on top of each other at the end of the day, so you can get a little bit of cleave damage out, slightly more efficient. But when you see that stealth come out and you see it withheld for a little bit, assuming that they did actually want to skip by and only pull that nullifier.
Now, I like what they're doing here with the nullifier. The nullifier, of course, about every 30 seconds does debuff a random player in the group, and they will have to go and collect their souls. Are they doing a full pull here? It looks like they're kind of opting to kill some of the trash. Looks like there's going to be a full wipe coming down almost from UC Irvine right now, as Shakibs is kind of frantically running around the edge. Not sure what the intent was there. They do kill a lot of that trash. Shakib does run out of the room in order to make sure that the first boss Curator does reset, but there's still a mass amount of trash coming up. Meanwhile, 3 of the members of the team do release and try to come back in. Now, tribute to what I was saying, Rich, is because we do know that that nullifier provides you with that soul shatter ability that once you go collect your soul, you get 100% damage increase for those 30 seconds. So maybe they were feeling confident enough there with one of their DPS buff to just go kill everything on top of the boss.
Still, though, I think that it is really greedy in a lot of ways. It's very easy when you do have that buff to maybe pull aggro if you open up a little bit too quickly. And on top of that, we already did see them use that Shroud of Concealment. Those seconds that they picked up there are also now going to be gone as well, because they're not going to be able to use that Shroud for about another 6 minutes. That was a little bit of a greedy play here. I don't mind pulling a lot of the trash. You know, maybe you go for 2 or 3 packs, maybe you go for all of them, but pulling them with Curator as well, definitely going to be risky. You can even pull all of them before Curator and actually pull back, get that LOS pull, and Curator will reset.
Going for 2-pack is usually quite entertaining indeed. UC Irvine, Shakib here, of course, demonstrating the strength of that self-sustain on the Vengeance Demon Hunter. He himself didn't die. Finished off most of the trash, of course, maintaining that 100% buff on himself as he was the only one in range, and they make sure to kill off the rest of that trash. Now, Curator, of course, already being pulled here for CSUC. Important notes on this boss, he will periodically spawn these electric field zones under the feet of players. Common strategy here would be for the entire team to stack up, not only to make sure that they congregate the pools together, but of course these volatile energies spawn near players and also jump to player locations. If some players are too far, it makes it very difficult for the melee and the tank to help cleave them down and decrease some of that party damage going out, which we do know, of course, that 1 minute into the fight, Curator will reach that evocate phase.
Relatively sloppy bad zones being dropped here by CSUC, but they should have plenty of time when that evocate actually does go down. But it has been UC Irvine that has caught up quite a bit here. Evocate now going out. Massive amounts of damage coming out.
And there's some good zones coming up from Irvine, which is what I was saying. They're playing that strat really well right now, collecting themselves properly, and really making sure they don't fill up too much of that room with those electric zones. CSUC doing a ton of damage during this evocate to the Curator, during which Curator does take 100% increased damage. The problem is, if they run out of space and they don't kill Curator by the time he reaches the wall here, they cannot double back. UC Irvine has that at their disposal should they not do enough damage. They're now entering their first evocate phase, and they're going to be popping as many CDs as possible to burn that health down. And
we've seen them catch up quite a bit. It looks a little bit further than it actually is because the evocates just come out, so you're actually going to see the Curator absolutely melt at this point. But even with that sloppy pull from UC Irvine, they're going to be able to down the boss at relatively the same time. The main thing that they have to worry about is they've already accrued 5 deaths, so that's going to be an additional 25 seconds on the board. So they are still about 30-ish seconds behind, but as you mentioned, they have these relatively good zones coming down for UC Irvine. Now they just need to start pulling as close to the door as you can. You can see them actually moving a little bit faster away now that they only have that 6% left.
Right, you are, and of course CSUC in no shocking manner does manage to finish the Curator off first. We do see UC Irvine kill it as well. They'll both be moving on to the portal where we move on to the topsy-turvy crazy part, or almost crazy part. Select does go down there at the very end. Not really sure what that was all about. Actually, I have no comment on that. I'm not really sure why. I think that was after the boss had died.
Yeah, I think maybe was he just hanging out in one of the void zones? I think that's the only thing that can maybe be a vestigial thing left on the ground from the boss.
Possible he didn't select his position very well. You're absolutely right. Nonetheless, CSUC moving down to this Fell Lord. Now, the Fell Lord, excuse me, the Wrathguard. Now, the problem here, of course, is this is another one of those singular mobs, Rich, that has a ton of health, takes ages to kill. What I'm expecting to see in a moment from UC Irvine, and in fact, they already did, they immediately CC'd it and are already moving on to the next boss. And I believe, by the way, what happened to Select is it seemed to have been like Quaking Pulse, if I'm not mistaken, that finished him off.
That makes a lot of sense.
We might have missed it.
That actually makes a lot of sense here. A lot going on at the moment, but you can see UC Irvine actually going to be able to pick up Shade of Medivh first. So I do want to reiterate that those 7 deaths, that's 35 seconds now that they are behind. We'll have to see if they can catch up on this boss as well, but we should talk about the mechanics. Nice kicks coming out on that Frostbolt, assuming that they're actually going to take, well, they have really good kicks, so they're actually going to kick the Inferno as well. A nice move, beam going to go down here as well.
I'm actually a bit worried about the kick capacity of CSUC. They have the tank and they have the Feral, but they will need to have very good communication coming out of the 2 Marks Hunters to make sure they rotate their kicks properly. Now, for those at home, of course, the important kicks are there are 3 casts on Shade of Medivh. One of them is a fire cast, one of them is a frost cast, and of course we do have those arcane missiles. The missiles is a huge damage on the tank. The tank can eat it and perhaps gain from it, such as Vengeance Demon Hunter, in this case the Empower Words. Inferno Bolts do stack a dot on you, so having a bonus interrupt is always useful. Now the most important, of course, is the frost cast. Any player that is successfully cast upon this frostbite will get trapped into a block of ice, after which another player will then need to use that Inferno Bolt to get hit and melt the ice.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they are actually kicking so many of the Infernos. Expect a lot of the time to actually maybe just get them to the outside of the room and just deal with them that way. We actually did see Nick take one of them there. Now in this intermission phase, 3 of those Guardian images are going to pop up. You need to very quickly go onto them, get them down as quick as possible because they will do massive amounts of damage. You can see that pressure coming out onto the whole group right now.
Yeah, tons of damage coming out in UC Irvine. Keep in mind, we are in a tyrannical setting, so eventually the healer will get gassed of mana if these are not killed fast enough. CSUC does go successfully through that phase. Now, Rich, we did talk about this before. You know, it is important, especially depending on which phase comes up, that these teams get the boss down as quickly as possible before having to deal with another one of the special phases. Now, we do know that the Flame Wreath phase or the Frost phase, the major phases, of course, such as we're seeing on CSUC's part, you can still actively DPS the boss here, but if they go long enough and have another Guardian phase, that's a huge amount of damage lost, as you cannot DPS Shade during that time.
And you can see right now the Hunter's trying to be relatively mobile there, but it is ultimately still going to be somewhat of a DPS loss for them. UC Irvine having to deal with the Flame Wreath phase wasn't bad for them at all. They just able to stay in position, and they snapped on to those Guardian, those little owls very quickly, and were able to take them down. Now UC Irvine starting to pull ahead.
So we do see a death over on CSUC's part. Double Flame Wreath coming up right now. Hopefully they're able to kill the boss off before those Flame Wreaths kill them. So they do manage to kill Shade off right there. They will have to be careful with the Quaking on top of the Flame Wreath, who unfortunately do see another death go down on Medivh right there on CSUC. So 2 of the Hunters go down. They're going to have to heal through the rest of that and make sure that they res them on the way down. So a fair bit of time lost, which will counter some of UC Irvine's 6 death differential in the meantime. Irvine, of course, already going down the crazy rabbit hole to the topsy-turvy pervy portion of Karazhan in just a moment.
So Flame Wreath was out. We saw that the Quaking overlapped. I think there was a little bit of a panic there. They didn't want to overlap the Quaking. When you're inside the Flame Wreath, though, even if you are overlapped with Quaking, you just can't move.
Absolutely, because if you do, that will lead to very explosive results. Now, there's a very long RP going down here. The next boss that we should be seeing will be, of course, that Mana Devourer, surrounded by all type of cuddly animals, such as rats and spiders and books. I don't know why books are cuddly, but they are in this case. Now, this is where we see a lot of this optional trash come up, Rich. Typically, we do see some teams opt to pull the spider closest to the Mana Devourer, whilst other ones just deal with it on the side.
Right now, it looks like they're going to try to stealth past as best as possible. We can see that a few members of the team don't have the stealth at their disposal, but they get by without a problem here. Trying to be efficient with that trash yet again is going to be UC Irvine, making their way straight to that Mana Devourer, expecting them to pull really big when they actually do get past this boss.
Now, I do want to mention here on the Mana Devourer, of course, the main mechanic being that he will expel those mana orbs from himself, and it's important for players to intercept those mana orbs, because if too many reach the boss and he reaches 100% energy, he will one-shot the entire team. Now, advantage here actually goes to CSUC because they have 2 turtles that they can use in order to absorb safely with an immunity a lot of those orbs coming in through 2 of the phases, which usually come about every 30 seconds or so. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. In the case of UC Irvine, they only have 1 cloak, so they're going to have to do a really good job, and the tank is going to have to eat an extra few, which I'm sure he'll love to because of that Empower Words buff, to make sure that none of those reach the boss as much as they can.
And we've seen them go for some risky strategies before. I don't think we'll see anything different here coming out of UC Irvine as they're working on that Mana Devourer. We saw a few of those balls go out just a few seconds ago. They dealt with them nice and fine. We're going to have another one of those phases very quickly here, but the Mana Devourer already at 44%. On the other end, CSUC catching up just a little bit here at that 50% mark, and we do see those aspects of the turtle coming out, and he's just playing that catch-up game. Hunter able to get, I think it was 7 of them or something crazy like that. It was actually nuts to watch him do that. Ball's going to come up here for UC Irvine as well. Let's see if Shakib's the only one to grab him here.
So important to note that UC Irvine is tanking the boss in the corner of the room in order to kind of cut off as much of that 360-degree angle at which those orbs can spawn. Plus, you can also jump under the boss to collect some of the ones dropping directly under them. So easier to collect, better strat on their part there, usually more privy to some of those immunity tactics. CSUC, of course, dealing with their last orb phase. They'll be finishing off Mana Devourer not too far behind Irvine. We're already kind of having the setup, Rich, here of that 30-second differential is going to be right down to the wire if the teams continue like this by the time they get to the last boss.
Double marks has just been so awesome for CSUC. Turtle is stronger than Ice Block in a lot of ways. Yeah, you don't have a way to reset it with something like your snap, but at the end of the day, you're mobile with it, so you can do so many mechanics like that. And we actually just saw 100 pops Turtle the first time, grabs pretty much all of the orbs because they're a pretty quick class, and then all of a sudden the second one going to be able to pop it the second time and grab him there, looking great in that fight. And like you said, it's really down to the wire here. Those 30 seconds could just be the difference.
So unfortunately, they have paraded the bottleneck in that door with so much Sanguine. We were just about to say Druid unfortunately does go down as a result. Keep in mind, those Sanguine pools do actually stack, so running through those proved to be deadly for the UC Irvine healer here. They do res him safely on the other side of that. Keep an eye on those mobs on the ceiling, and now you can look away because they don't do absolutely anything. Moving downstairs in the meantime, up the bridge in a moment. I wouldn't be shocked in a moment here to see from UC Irvine the second mass stealth come out past those mobs. In the meantime, of course, not too far behind, CSUC is dealing with these Mana Devourers and will themselves go over to that upside down land in just a moment.
And once they do get through that, we are going to see that chess event. Do you think any of these teams are more prepared for the chess event than the other?
You know, I actually spoke to some of these players earlier, and they said they spend weeks and weeks training at actual real-life chess in order to prepare for this event and make sure that they can clinch that checkmate. So we'll have to see if some of that training came in line. Of course, that was an absolute lie. Please don't listen to me when I ever say anything like that again. Now, important to note here, I'm actually really shocked, Rich, that UC Irvine did not opt to skip. Now, in a teaming environment, teams usually do skip that caster, that pyromancer at the top of the bridge there.
Wait, was I supposed to start listening to you again?
Oh, you. Talk about this later. So I'm surprised to see that they didn't opt to skip. Now, of course, they calculated the percentage quite well here. This chess event should give them that remaining 100%, but oftentimes that Pyromancer is a huge waste of time for the reasons that we discussed earlier. Plus, you have to soak some extra orbs on him. Solo mob, non-efficient cleave, so I'm shocked to see that they didn't pull perhaps the Spider with Mana Devourer earlier. whatever it may have been. Nonetheless, UC Irvine does move over to this chess event first.
And they do a great job of cleaving here as well. So one of the big things with the king, you have to actually take down one of the other pieces on the board to get rid of that shield. And then once you get the king below the threshold of about 30%, he won't actually put up his shield again, so you are able to bring him down. But you can see even the queen there was getting cleaved on. So if they happen to not get the king down in time, they still would have been able to easily take down that queen, get the shield off again, and then take down the king. That was a flawless chess event coming out of UC Irvine. Now they just have to wait for the RP.
I was going to say, UC Irvine crushed that event right there.
I actually thought that the reason I asked you the first time around if we thought one of the teams was going to be slightly better at chess, I was saying, yeah, I think that CSUC probably would. That's why they went for this map. You know, a lot of focus from UC Irvine's comp is going to be on the massive amounts of AoE damage. Yes, Cleave, their comps are slightly good at it, but the main thing is we see Select just wanting to get to pop all of his cooldowns and hit Ravager. Don't get to see that too much in the dungeon, but UC Irvine looking very good here. After they had a few mistakes, they're really starting to rebound at this point.
Of course, there is a bit of RNG involved with the chess event, which we otherwise don't see in the rest of the expansion, depending on where, of course, some of those knights do jump, and it seems that that worked in UC Irvine's favor for their massive cleave comp. They do move up to the last boss here, Viz'aduum. Now, he does have 3 phases. At 66 and 33%, he will teleport up to some of those ships you see at the top of your screen, empowering or having some new abilities here. Nick getting caught in that beam, which does a ton of damage, luckily gets out prior to proccing that cheat death. Now, notable abilities here is that cast on the tank that will need a 3-person interruption chain. Otherwise, the tank, of course, in this case, can eat it for that Empower Words. He will have that beam that will later potentially punt players off the ship. And, of course, the most dangerous switch are these balls coming out of that player.
And need to make sure that you dodge those for sure. But we can see CSUC in an otherwise RNG-free expansion has not gotten as clumped up of a grouping. So they're working on that king all the way by itself, finally going to be able to get it down. And now they're going to still have to wait through the RP. So there's even more of a gap than we would anticipate. This was CSUC's map pick. They are still up by a few seconds. They have additional 30 seconds in their back pocket, but UC Irvine looks like they are much further in the lead than 30 seconds, now up on this second ship.
Yeah, so this is where things start to get a bit hairy, which I wouldn't know about. Now, of course, we do have to worry that these beams can actually punt players completely off the ship, rendering them dead for the rest of the encounter. That you won't have access to their corpse for that battle res. So they have to make sure to point in the right direction and move out of those bombardment AoE. So well done by the players to move there. In the meantime, UC Irvine will try to get Viz'aduum. Usually players, Rich, if I'm not mistaken here, will try to pop those cooldowns in this second phase because it's usually the most dangerous phase here. Try to get out of this as quickly as possible by getting to 33% and move on to the next ship. Unfortunately, CSUC's elevator music is still sounding in the bottom as now they only now get access to Viz'aduum.
And you can see here a lot of damage coming out. It doesn't look like we see an incarnation getting popped yet. Maybe it got popped a little bit earlier. If we are seeing that ring come out there, the impeccable Fel Essence may be able to actually get 2 incarn phases, and then we'll see some of those cooldowns get popped in the 3rd phase. But totally agree on that second ship. You want to move through that as quick as possible. This final ship tends to be the one that's a little bit easier. If you make it here, you kind of get a little bit of a breath. But we've seen teams mess up on this before. I actually do remember when we were casting over in the MDI, we saw a few people get punted off, but one of the nice things about this composition is they do have that massive amount of AoE damage, so we will see these packs melt.
So, of course, as they move over to our resident eyeball boss, Irvine will need to watch out for that threshold where there's 3 Chaos Orb cast, but it looks like they're just going to be nuking him down. Doesn't even have a chance to keep an eye on things, and they are going to take this one 2-0 over CSUC.
The big thing there, too, is actually Nick. I want to highlight, you just see Nick all of a sudden doing crazy amounts of damage. You expect the Warrior to do a lot of damage because he can, like we've said a few times before, do things like Ravager, which tend to kill a lot of things very quickly. But the thing that Nick is able to do there is actually rock out with those Glaive Storms and then use all of those combo points right onto the boss. So it's not just a DPS pad, it's actually a lot of single target damage coming out because you get basically 5 combo points off of 1 GCD and invest them all on the target that you want to die. And that was Viz'aduum. They spelled his doom, and now they took it out in 2-0 fashion. One of the scariest teams that we knew was in this bracket. We finally get to see them, and it looks
time upstairs while the healer has no access.
funny enough, the healer's going to have a huge amount of AoE damage as well, probably even just a little bit more damage than the Warlock in this particular scenario, rocking both of those massive AoE damage trinkets. But Salute, we've talked about it quite a bit. Let's see how big they decide to go on this first pull of our last series of the day.
It looks like they're going all in for sure on Irvine Valley. Shix, of course, going in with those shoulders. We will see that meta pop momentarily after he dumps all of his sigils on the ground. All the DPS following suit, getting ready to help. Here come the stuns up from the Havoc Demon Hunters. The silence goes down as well. There should be a sigil of fear coming soon. Sigil of chains well done in the first place to make sure they grip those mobs out of that initial sanguine pool. And now we should be seeing some kiting around in a circle to make sure they don't sit in those sanguine pools for too long.
We do see a little bit of healing go out here on one of the Vile Shards, I believe it was. But overall, this is a relatively clean pool, and they're going to chain into the next pack. The question is, will that Warlock jump down at any time, even without the Seed of Corruption build, able to get out a huge amount of damage here, about 4 million, really succeeding on lighting up the meters. And we can see more Seeds of Corruption coming out, but also focusing on that Unstable Affliction, really targeting which mobs wants to bring down first. Another Seed of Corruption going to come out here as well. But now looking at Cal, they're at about the same place. They have a few more percentages on the board, but these are some of the cleanest pulls that we've seen out of Nels so far. Big damage coming out here from the Monk.
Yeah, no damage, no deaths rather for either team. We did see a bit of sloppiness in the previous series. Of course, Cal wrapping up the rest of this pull before going downstairs. Of course, the RP has started. That's why you saw the dialogue box come over on Cal's side. Irvine Valley working their way down right now, seeing some of those avalanche potions come down, and they should be ready to pull Rockmora here in a second at about the same time. Now, both teams are missing, if I'm not mistaken, a bit of percent. I think they didn't opt to pull some of those basilisks, or as we like to call them here, ritualisks on the side. So they will have to make some of that percentage up later. But Irvine Valley having access to Rockmora first and not far behind, rather, of course, is Cal.
Yeah, those crocodiles were not pulled. That was actually something I noticed, but I didn't want to draw attention to because I feel like I talk about crocodiles altogether too much. We should talk about Rockmora, though, right now, because it is a very solid strategy to go into this one knowing exactly what you need to do with these skitters. Skitters are going to spawn throughout the fight, and the skitters, if there are more than the more that are up, the more damage Rockmora is actually going to be able to do with this AoE damage. And then also you can see that zone going out on the ground. When you're inside of that, you do not move. If you move, you're going to take a massive amount of damage as well. So the DPS really need to be getting as much damage out onto the skitters as possible.
Right, you are. And of course, both teams pretty neck and neck here. They're doing an excellent job of dealing with those skitters. Rockmora down to 40% on Irvine Valley's side. I do like to see that they, what I would assume to be, start moving towards the exit of the area so that once the Rockmora dies, they will be as close as possible to those barrels. A lot of damage coming up on Cal's side. Luckily, they are healed to full. Nothing too dangerous to the skitters, but you just do see the raw power after that stomp if it is amplified by some of those skitters in the area. Irvine Valley now down to 15%.
Man, I love seeing the Warlock too there, just switching up his trinket. He actually threw on his Tarnished Sentinels medallion there for a second, and the amount of single target damage you can get out there with a Warlock is absolutely huge. You can be proccing it left and right, getting to do those additional amounts of damage, but also it just adds so much mastery, which is going to be one of those preferred stats for Warlocks, no matter what the scenario is as Affliction. And you can see going for that specialized single target build, working really well here for the Warlock. Cal starting to trail behind just a little bit, 6% left on Rockmora.
Yeah, definitely some more single target from Irvine, but Cal, much like Irvine, unfortunately did choose paper in this rock paper series, is managing to down Rockmora, and of course moving over to those barrels. I do like some of that min-max that we saw from Irvine Valley Ridge. You know, you saw the Warlock put down that Warlock gate just to save that extra second or two as they move over to the barrels, of course having access to the lower area first. Irvine Valley now moving over to those dreaded pelters that we talked about so much earlier.
Yeah, you really need to think about each second and what it actually does for you. So for example, when you actually put out that gateway, obviously it does take some time, but that split second of your DPS, you know, maybe losing a global there, maybe putting up a UA or getting a few ticks off of your Malefic Grasp, ultimately is going to be less than having every single member of your team shooting straight in and getting to pull this trash a little bit quicker. So heads up play by the Warlock. Sometimes the only thing that you don't only want to focus on the meters, even though that's all I do, but we are going to see this drummer. This is going to be huge. They need to get this drummer down as quick as possible.
Or interrupt him in any way possible. Make sure that we don't get that extra breaker coming down. Tons of extra health needed. Got to move these mobs away. Well punted there to make sure that they don't heal from the Sanguine. Now, Irvine Valley here did have a bigger pull, much bigger pull, almost akin to Irvine earlier. In fact, they didn't pull the Hulk with it. Zero does go down, so we do have our first death of the match, unfortunately. lots of things to avoid there with so much Sanguine in the area. Luckily, they're cleaning up the last mob. Here we did finally see the danger of those pelters. Gets finished off by some of that residual damage. Does release, manage to get back. Both teams did opt to do a skipping strat, hugging the right side of the wall, skipping as much of that left side trash as possible. Cal now finishing up the pelter pack, and also now moving to the Hulk in a moment, so they're really not very far behind at the moment, and they also have a death differential in their favor.
Interesting thing, I mean, we see beautiful initial pulls coming out from both these groups. They do Rockmora just fine, but when they actually get to this phase, they pretty much do the pug strat. I think this is what most groups do. They don't try to do anything cute. They don't do anything cheeky. You know, we actually see those pelters just jumping about, throwing those jagged discs, and we see the Shaper get tunneled down first. That is very good, but it does lose them quite a bit of seconds, but because both Cal and Irvine Valley did that strategy, it tends to even out.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And, you know, they're with basically the gap that was formed on Rockmora has all been bit closed now. So they're quite close together. Trash is pretty equivalent on both parts. We do have another death going down for Irvine right now. They do use that res from the Warlock to come up, and they have to be careful with that patrolling Hulk in a moment. Hopefully they're ready to pull him, and if not, they should back off. Looks like they do grab him. They have to be careful to interrupt these Shapers, as you mentioned, Ridge. Those stone bolts hurt a lot, and there's already so much extra damage going out. You don't want to accidentally have someone get hit by one of those bolts, as let's say a Quaking's going out, whatever it may be. Nonetheless, Irvine Valley well picking up that patrol, making sure to face the Hulk away from the rest of the group and DPSing it down and CCing it after its fracture cast.
You know, it's interesting. Pelters get so much focus in this dungeon, and everyone's going to be talking about how you actually handle the Pelters, but I feel like it's the Shapers that don't get enough love because they really are deadly, and you need to get the kick in because they really are the thing that can shape a bad pull.
Right you are, Rich. Right you are. A shape indeed. Now, Irvine Valley, I think, made a bit of a mistake here. What happened? Yeah, so LD does go down. Zero goes to 0% HP at the moment, meaning he does as well die. So that's going to be an extra 2 deaths on their part. Now, they did make a bit of a mistake here. Shix did have an issue where he actually got punted by the Fracture from the Hulk into the next Pelter pack that they need to kill. I don't think they were ready for that. And as a result, once he was punted, it led to a situation where the Hulk was actually sitting in Sanguine, healing himself a massive amount of HP back, and then running over to that deadly Pelter pack. So we're going to see a pretty messy situation as LD runs back frantically to try to help finish off this group.
Hey, but NP stayed up, so this should be no problem.
I was waiting for that one later, and you stole it. Nonetheless, Mr. Campbell, we do see that Cal has already started working on Allarog. We did see in the previous series, of course, the danger of not paying attention to the correct idol as it goes down here.
Yeah, you need to actually, as you said, take off your sunglasses on this one and find the right idol. We can see that skull coming up here. The team definitely in sync. They don't want to make that mistake. Damage going to ramp up here at this part, and we've talked about this phase quite a bit. It takes a very long time, and if you get one towards the end of the health pool of the boss, all of a sudden you've added additional seconds to the clock, and that's actually a thing that can create a huge gap between these two teams. Both of them working on Allarog right now. Irvine Valley trailing slightly behind, and also with 4 deaths in their back pocket.
Excellent movement there by Leander Sell as well, the Brewmaster on Cal, making sure to rotate that boss when those idols in the first phase come up. Leading to a greater cleave potential for the melee and the tank himself. Now, they do have to watch out to spread out for this Quaking, and of course, those hands coming up do a ton of damage if you don't move out in time, or if you accidentally get hit by one on the way. Excellent movement there, again, for the Bellowing Idols, as I mentioned earlier. Deals no problem with that huge Sunder Nuke Nature stack on the tank as well. And it looks like they're just starting to approach their last down phase once the boss reaches 100 energy. There it is indeed. And, you know, they're in a pretty good position. I mean, we saw in the previous series at 37%, they still managed to get it down before the next one. So I think they're in a pretty good position here, Rich, at 29.
Yeah, I totally do agree. I want to know with those hands, we don't give too much attention to Quaking. Quaking, we already saw it with the Flame Wreaths. Sometimes you'll just be in a position where when you actually have a mechanic that forces you to move, you're going to run Quaking into someone. We can actually see an overlap here onto Balance. Balance, of course, does have that cheat death still, so it can somewhat tank things like that. But those little things like Quaking's getting stacked, if you are trying to move out a mechanic, you're not coordinated with your group right, that's where massive amounts of damage can be picked up.
Balanced, of course, doing that huge death from above nuke there. Aptly named Balanced, as it is one of the most balanced classes in this game at the moment with those rogues and their survivability. Allarog should be going down in just a moment here, 8%. In the meantime, we should be seeing the down phase, and we actually are seeing it right now from Irvine Valley, who's fallen just a bit behind. And of course, they also have that 4 death differential that they need to make up for, which is an extra 20 seconds on the map. Cal well moves ahead and will likely be skipping, Rich, I would assume, of course, this 3-pack here on the side.
Yeah, they got both of these traps too, so they can definitely make sure that they aren't going to pull them. Even though there isn't teaming, it is good to be safe. Just make sure that you put those traps out. I'm really enjoying this Baldy work. I'm not talking about you, Sloot. I'm looking at this Hunter.
Thank you for noticing. I've been working very hard on that shine. Irvine Valley getting well out of that transition phase. Allarog coming back up. They should as well have no problem dealing with, of course I'm not discussing the Warlock here, but they should have no problem dealing with getting him down prior to the next transition phase. Allarog, rather NP doing well to move out of those swirlies. In the meantime, dealing with that quaking, Cal has now done one of the larger pulls leading up to Nyalaxis. Now, we have seen a lot of these pulls, Rich, from Nyalaxis go south very quickly, especially with Sanguine, but more importantly, players not focusing on proper CC on those grubs.
Yeah, grubs can be the one thing that really just sends this pull out of control, especially on a Sanguine week. I think that that's one of the most important things to think about, because all of a sudden pools are going to be coming up in weird places, and they are much harder to move if a metamorphosis does happen. So this is a pool where things can go wrong. We can see going for a massive amount of AoE is going to be balanced here. He's going to get that big death from above coming out. A lot of pressure coming off of the back of the Glaive Storm. Can also have that initial burst if he is rocking the legendary shoulders, the mantle of the assassin. And then on top of that, he's probably thrown on glaives here as well for good measure.
Equal on the other side, we do see Irvine with a huge pull as well. A few players already down. Oh my god, Shix almost goes down, barely hangs on. I'm pretty sure Last Resort proc. Actually, I don't see the debuff on him, so they barely caught him up just in time, if I'm not mistaken. We'll have to take a look on the bigger screen when it comes up. Irvine managing just now to stabilize after killing a ton of those smaller worms, which immediately spawn a ton of stacking Sanguine pools. Cal right now cleaning up the rest of the trash, getting ready to pull Nyalaxis in just a moment here.
I also want to say, this is probably the cleanest run we've seen so far. 0 deaths coming in from Cal all the way to Nyalaxis. Even that pool looking very clean here. And they're taking their time pulling Nyalaxis. They're not just going to dive in willy-nilly. Tank finally going to roll on over there. Going to get this one started. And Sloot, we should tell everyone at home that they should definitely be looking out for those Devouts that just got spawned. Yeah,
those Devouts that just got spawned and are already dead, not to mention. Those are very important to be destroyed prior to reaching the boss. If the boss does get his and or her mouth on those Devouts, it will devour them, leading to a 50% damage buff for the remainder of the encounter. Players do well to DPS and slow those prior to getting to Nyalaxis, and of course they will have to place these Rancid Maws well on the side, which soon enough Leander Cell will have to use in order to slow themselves and not get back near the boss during that spike tank cast. For if the tank gets eaten as well, then Rich, that boss gets the exact same damage buff for the remainder of the encounter.
If Nyalaxis gets to nibble on anything, Nyalaxis will become even bigger of a threat. But I also want to talk about this double hunter composition that they do have. This pretty much goes for ranged in general, but it's so much easier to actually snap onto those Devouts, making them a null factor. And we've seen those hunters do it before they even do jump down. Basically, they're up in a little coven, they hop on down, and then they walk on over to the boss. And most groups, you see the melee actually charging or leaping, trying to get onto them the second that they come down. These hunters just able to make that. It saves so much time there, and it allows balance to just focus on the boss. And you see those shots coming out before we can even see the Devouts on the screen.
And of course, Leander Cell well demonstrating there the mass mobility of the Brewmaster Monk, spinning out and rolling at the very, torpedoing in this case, at the very last second before that spike tongue channel finishes over to safety. Now Nyalaxis does reach 20% over for Cal side. Balance going a bit low there. No proc on the cheat death. Nyalaxis does have a soft enrage at 20%, I believe, for an extra 20% damage for the remainder of the phase. Nothing too dangerous, but you know, there's a lot of damage going out with this poison. Nyalaxis should safely go down here for a Cal soon. Meanwhile, Irvine's still working at that 50% mark on Nyalaxis.
I did want to confirm to you too, you weren't sure if it was a he or a she. It actually is a she. I was at her house warming party last month.
Nyalaxis going down to 1%, 1% now, and they will be able to jump down that wormhole in just a moment and have access to the last boss. In the meantime, Irvine Valley dealing with the next round of Devouts coming up. Should be able to deal with it pretty well, but the Warlock really is kind of solo dealing with it here. They're going to lose a lot of effective damage with those Demon Hunters having to run out. What they are doing intelligently is letting the Devouts get close enough so that the Demon Hunters can support that damage while still cleaving the boss just a bit. Nyalaxis now reaching that soft enrage phase as well for Irvine Valley, while in the meantime, Cal has now pulled their first trash in the lower area.
Here's the question. Let's say that both of these teams are trying to pay attention to this on their second monitor, something like that. They know how close it is. Who do you think has to play riskier here? Obviously, Cal is already ahead. It looks like they are going to go for the safer strategy, but we've seen how successful teams can be, even on the Sanguine week, of maybe pulling the trash down in the pit with Viz'aduum, or sorry, with the last boss here. Do you think that that is something that we could see again?
I mean, I think Irvine Valley really has to be a bit riskier here. You know, they just downed Nyalaxis, so I think they're now warming up to the idea that they have to pull the rest of the trash downstairs, perhaps with the boss entirely as they approach the final boss coming up here. Dartrul, of course, it's not Viz'aduum as you see on your screen. That is the evil Dartrul, not the eyeball boss from the Legion. Nonetheless, Cal does do a fairly big pull here at the bottom without the boss, because I guess they just want to play it safe with that Sanguine that we alluded to earlier. Very dangerous to be pulling those trash monsters and have Sanguine spawn on top of them while the boss is doing one of the channels on the tank.
Me trying to read there definitely led to my doom, but we will see that Dartrul is going to be that final boss, and it looks like Cal is going to be ready to do that in just a few short seconds here. And we should refresh everyone, if maybe they're just tuning in, on how these mechanics actually go. The first thing to pay attention to is going to be that char skin, but we got to look at Irvine Valley having somewhat of a sloppy pool here. It looked like they may go down for a few seconds. Have they stabilized? It looks like they should be fine, and now they're going to jump down to this pit. Let's see if they decide to play it safe or if they decide to go big. The first char skin is going to be stunned on the side of Cal.
Yeah, so we do have to get those char skins into the wall. Once they're stunned, they do take that 100% increased damage as well. Most importantly, Dartrul does have that landslide hit on the tank, usually followed by another hit in a moment that if there's no active mitigation on the tank with this Molten Crash, they will take even more damage and get punted very far across the arena down here. So well done by Leandracell. Of course, not as difficult on a Brewmaster to maintain that Iron Skin Brew uptime and make sure you meet that mechanical check. Crystal Spikes going out again on Cal's side. Want to make sure that you don't shatter those with that landslide either. Leandracell getting so low there, that just heals him back up after that Molten Crash, and players in a moment will be getting ready for that Magma Wave.
So Irvine Valley still does have this one pack to go through here, so they decide to try to make up for lost time. They're going to pull that pack. Instead of going all in, they go for kind of that half strategy. They say, okay, we're a little too scared to do that. Sanguine could be a little too much, but we need to make up for lost time. We'll pull one pack in, but the tank is going to go down. They get punished for trying to go big, but I have to commend them for this play. It was their best chance, but now it is going to be the healer on the side of Cal who is getting spiked. It looks like we will see this Druid be able to stabilize at this moment. Battle Res going to be coming out on the tank on the side of UC Irvine. They're trying to get back into this one, but it looks like it's going to be a full wipe coming out, and that should be enough for Cal to take this, even with the pressure coming out onto them. 26% left onto Dartrul. If they can deal with this char skin, they should be able to take the first game in this final series of the day.
Right, you are. Cal just managing to hang on here in the end. We should have that Magma Wave channel coming up. Now, we have seen groups fail at this late in the match. It should be okay here. Man, on Irvine Valley, the problem is that Battle Res took so long to come up from NP. I'm not sure if it was just coming up off CD. Nonetheless, things heating up here on Cal's side as Magma Wave gets that last hit off. 15% on them. They should be able to kill the rest of that char skin as it's gaining its increasing damage stacks, cleave it efficiently on the boss, and they should nothing but, you know, get that win here, just like you said, and it's going to be looking like a full wipe on Irvine's side in a moment as well.
Heating up for sure, but Dartrul isn't the only one throwing up heat. Cal going to be able to cook this dungeon. This is the first perfect run that we have seen in the entire tournament. 0 deaths on the side of Cal, and they look like absolute monsters going through.
In such lack of coordination on Harboron. So I think that's going to be a big turning point for these teams to see exactly how they handle that boss. Nonetheless, Irvine Valley getting right into it right away with this massive pull leading up to Emerald.
This is also a dungeon, and we haven't talked about it too much because this is the first time that we're going to see it with the Sanguine affix. Sanguine can just make an absolute mess. You're inside of the ship. There are a lot of tight corridors. You're here. You have a lot of the mobs that really aren't that mobile. It's hard to actually control their movement. So all of a sudden, you'll see one of those strikes come out, and it goes down, and then there's a Sanguine out in the middle of nowhere, and that same thing going to happen on the top portion of the ship.
And you know, both teams opting to do the same thing, but Cal just getting off so much more AoE damage. Look at that rogue damage coming in from balance, that very balanced damage. Now, they're done already. They've well kited out of that Sanguine, and Irvine's really having a lot of issue here. They've completely cut themselves off across the bridge with all this Sanguine that's been dumped. A lot of these mobs that you said, Rich, are largely mobile due to some casts. Some of these Defiant Strikes have actually healed themselves back to full, so they're having to backtrack all the way. NP actually having to drop himself a Warlock portal to get across that bridge safely to make sure that they're not in that Sanguine. Nice heads-up play for them. Cal, of course, as a result, though, is already on Imran. Now, notable things on Imran, of course, are those swirling Bane casts around the side. Those will turn into Skeletal Warriors later unless absorbed. Most teams opt to just deal with the ads, and of course, Rich, the most dangerous is that huge Dark Slash that we just saw right there on Leandracell.
Well, a big thing, you think that you've seen balance, you haven't seen balanced yet. Wait for these skeletons that you mentioned to come out. He's going to be able to get off that Glaive Storm, that Shuriken Storm, and when he gets off that Shuriken Storm, those are combo points that he can invest straight into the Fallen King. This is one of the reasons rogues are so strong here. They stayed up for quite a lot of time, able to get out massive amounts of damage. You are going to see the Hunters be a little bit higher there. It's because they're actually focusing on doing AoE damage as well.
Yeah, you know, just about double.
But the thing is sometimes they're showing off. They're doing big damage on the meter. But the thing is all of the damage that Balance gets off of those skeletons is going straight into the Fallen King.
Now, Leandracell, of course, particularly vulnerable to these Dark Slashes, likely spec'd into Mystic Vitality. Here's another one. Heals back up to full. Imran now will be going down in a moment and won't be able to get a second Skeletal phase, and Baldi, as most Baldis intelligently are, waiting there for that horn, ready to trigger it. As soon as Imran falls, they will be having that RP go down, not wasting any valuable seconds as they go through. Irvine already at 25%, regardless of the mishap they had with the trash.
Caster favoritism on Baldi. I see what you're doing there. I do want to note a really impressive thing that we are seeing is massive amounts of healing damage coming out here.
Schick's actually proccing that last resort right there, unfortunately, at the very last second on Imran. He's not going to have access to that for a few minutes now, and there are a lot of dangerous mobs down here in these dirty bowels of the ship. Now, we have to be careful because some of these all of these Swiftblades actually have a very sinister strike, Shadow Spike off global cooldown hit on the tank that deals mass damage. Gonna want to have that last resort, which they have no access to now. Leandracell having a bit of issue staying live here, very heavy into stagger, healers having some trouble healing them up, and of course, because of the space and the real estate available, or rather lack thereof, in the lower portion of this ship, Sanguine is really a big factor here, Rich.
It's a huge factor, especially when there are mechanics that are forcing you to move as well, like the barrels that are coming out. You lose more and more space, you lose options left and right, but Cal still looking incredible here. That was a relatively ambitious pull. They went pretty big on it. Now they're going to be moving over to those doggos, but Cal still not even accruing a single death here. On the other side, Irvine Valley looking quite good. They did have a mistake. It didn't cost them a life yet, but they are starting to catch up just a little bit here to the other team. Both very serious competitors here, but keep in mind, Irvine, this was their map pick. So they might be able to break out some crazy things here.
Right, you are. Cal does get those dogs down and does well actually to move them around the side of the ship, making sure that they don't accidentally aggro the Mariner in the meantime. One of the most dangerous mobs in this dungeon. You can see right now why. Oh, this combo into that combo into Quaking could have been absolutely lethal for some of the players. Well done by Wapol to make sure that everyone's topped off prior to that hit. In the meantime, Irvine in a moment moving over to that dog pack as they aggro them right now. Hopefully we will find out at some point who let these dogs out, but for now they'll have to down them all. In the meantime, Cal now working on the left side of the ship, as is commonly seen on that grind board.
I also want to say with Cal, yeah, you give props to the healer there, but also the DPS with some heads-up play. They're actually able to leap out during that Quaking, and also we saw that aspect of the turtle to come up as well. That's going to buy the healer quite a lot of time, and now they're going to be able to pull these two bad boys, these two champions that are going to actually have a fear cast, but we are going to see the Baldi go down. Going to be picked up here, but that is the first death that we've seen out of this team in this series. It shouldn't cost them too much. It's a short run back. I don't think that they should invest the battle res there, and so wise not to do that. But Baldi going to go down here again.
Right you are, Rich. Unfortunately, he does go down again, but as far as we know, Baldi's in fact never dies, so he should back up just in a moment. Irvine already moving up the stairs. I do like what they did. They were a bit behind. They pulled the Mariner along with that Grime Walker, safely moving it up the stairs and moving over to these champions. Now, the danger with the champions here that Rich alluded to is that they will cast a coordinated fear. If that fear lands, it will AoE fear everything around it within 10 to 20 yards, and players that are rendered immobile, especially the tank, will get absolutely trucked during that and likely die. Very important to have coordinated interrupts on on those. All it requires is one 15-second cooldown interrupt. So they do well here. We'll have to see in a moment if Irvine does well here to do that, but Cal has suffered 2 deaths as a result of that pack.
That's going to add 10 seconds to their clock, but they are still trucking through, finally getting out of these lower bowels of the ship, and they'll be moving up to the poop deck right now.
Absolutely, and of course our favorite boss here, Harbron, which is causing teams in this tournament a particularly large amount of stress and problems. Now Harbron, of course, back when was buffed, as a lot of World of Warcraft players do know. He was easier at the start, but now he provides quite a wallop on the players. That Cosmic Scythe that he gets off is a huge line frontal in front. Anybody caught into it was very much in the range of getting one-shot, as we see Balance chunk down there to 11%. Combinations of that along with Quaking can easily one-shot a player. Now, most importantly, we're going to have to take a look at the strategies of these two teams. Most importantly is that players try to stick together as much as possible. Unfortunately, Baldy was off by himself there, which provides a lack of cleave and efficiency from the melee and the tank as they have to move across the map in order to aid. Once again, here with the Servitor, about 25 yards out, they're going to have to run over across that nether rip and try to help. It just causes such inefficiency. They have to move better together. We're seeing that much better on the side of Irvine, but we do have a death as well from Zero.
And Cal not safe by any means. Balance was spiked initially when we first started to take a peek at Harbron. Luckily, he still does have his cheat death in his back pocket. Another Scythe going to go out here, not going to connect to anyone on the side of Cal. They're doing a much better job of staying grouped here, and now you can actually see the ads are in much more favorable positioning. They're going to get just taken out very quickly, dealt with swiftly. Nether Rips in favorable positioning as well. And actually, this is when you can start to see a group spread out a little bit if they want to favor Quaking, but Baldy going to go down there. The Scythe, I think, is what took him down. And we also saw Baldy use his aspect of the turtle to try to avoid one of those sides. Now they can spread out a little bit because Harbron only does have that 30% left. They're going to avoid incidental damage from the Quaking. They're also going to be able to get out of these Nether Rips as well, and they should be able to swiftly deal with the one more ad, but they're going to play it safe. They're going to group back up.
And Irvine having a full wipe downstairs, Rich. Time and time again, we see just how out of control things can get on this boss. Irvine's going to have to run all the way back up, incur that extra 25 seconds worth of death penalty, and now Cal is in a very dominant position and very favorable position to finish this boss off and somewhat safely and comfortably start off the rest of the ship on the way to Helia. Shouldn't have too much trouble now with Harbron at 4%. Even if they have a death here, they will be able to res once this boss dies, as the new checkpoint will be up here on the poop deck.
The other thing as well is Balanced had that cheat death left, so if everybody goes down, Balance kind of has that additional chance to get stabby and bring down the boss when you are at that last few percentages there. So Cal, towards the end, looking very safe. But one of the things I've started to notice with Harbron is really 60% is that point where you can tell whether or not a team's going to be able to get it down. At 60%, if they've been too spread out, all of a sudden the Nether Rips are in bad positioning and teams start to get forced to spread out, especially when you do have this Quaking affix. So for Irvine right now, pay special attention to this beginning phase of the boss. It's really going to dictate the tempo throughout the rest of Harbron. That first Scythe going out now. Cal already starting to work on this trash at a very steady pace. They didn't go for that crazy Zerg strategy, running all the way through the ship trying to grab a whole bunch of them. They're just going to take their time.
Right, you are with Irvine here. You're absolutely right, Rich. At around 50-60% is when Harbron harbors most of his energy, making sure that players have the most difficult time, especially if they get trapped in the corner with some unfavorable Nether Rips. Looking down, of course, at Cal right now, they're starting to chew through the rest of the ship. We're introduced to a couple of new mobs, including Mist Callers here, that do have a lot of healing abilities that must be interrupted, stunned, whatever you need to do to make sure that they don't heal some of the surrounding mobs. And of course, littered around these are some of those champions casting that AoE fear. Now, there's not too much space on this ship, so you have to make sure that you move very well with that Sanguine and not, of course, accidentally pull something else. Irvine Valley right now looking to have a much more solid pull this time around on Harbron and much more favorable positioning.
You can see NP actually moved out for quite some time there, but paying attention to when those timers are actually going to go off, knows that he has to move in. He does get targeted. The ad spawn right on top of the boss. Very easy to cleave that down. Another Scythe going to go out here, and we actually do see the tank taking huge amounts of damage, yo-yoing just a little bit here, finally getting brought back up to a stable range, hanging out at that 60%. No one going to get hit by the Scythe here. Harbron should fall down, even if a mistake does happen here. You got the dot damage rolling. Harbron going to fall finally for Irvine Irvine Valley, but you can see Cal already at that mini-boss.
Yeah, Cal's already working on Skjol over in the corner. Now, he will provide the remaining percentage needed for the trash, after which, of course, that fog wall will dissipate and they will have access to Helya, the last boss. Important on Skjol to make sure that they interrupt the cast that they just did there. Otherwise, players will get debuffed with a damage taken debuff. And there are some skeletons that occasionally pop up from the side just to say hello. Usually not too much problem. You just group them up. And in the fact of this comp right now will actually help balance, get some extra DPS on Skjol himself. Nothing too much to write about here. It is not fortified. They should be able to down it and get ready to pull Helya. While in the meantime, it looks like Irvine Valley probably feeling some of this pressure, needing to do some riskier pulls here in order to try and catch up.
And now Cal just cleaning up their dinner there, going to be able to jump down, and now all that stands between them and moving on in this bracket is going to be Helya.
And 6 tentacles.
And a few tentacles. Correct. Thank you for counting them as well. The main thing here is this ace and elimination match. Cal looking primed to take it. If they do, Irvine Valley will no longer be in this tournament. Cal moves on in the lower bracket. You talk about these tentacles, Sloot. What should we be looking for?
The main one really is the one you see right here on your screen. There's 2 types. The most dangerous one being, of course, the Destructor Tentacle. It will whip the tank around into shape quite viciously, doing tons of damage, which is why you see the players focusing it down first. And of course, it is much more dangerous than the Grasping Tentacles, as the Grasping Tentacles don't actually do anything, so there's nothing to worry about them. However, you will, while dodging one or the other side of the ship, as you saw Helya just cast her frontal nature there, you will need to kill a total of whatever combination you want of 6 of these tentacles in order to access Helya's second phase. They had a favorable spawn here with that Destructor in the front, allowing them to get some more effective and efficient cleave on both the Destructor and Grasping Tentacle at the front. But now they'll have to watch out here on the left side as that nature damage does come down. They do a good job communicating, making sure to move out of the way and start working more towards on these tentacles.
And that's going to be a mechanic that is very similar to the breath that Helya is going to let out in this second phase. After we see these tentacles go down, Helya is going to break off that front part of the ship, really gets angry with that ship, breaks it on off, and then the players get to engage Helya herself, and they need to get her down to around 70%.
Yep, so they do need to finish this last tentacle here. In the meantime, Irvine having a few scary moments there with LD as well. Luckily manages to stabilize as they're working on Skjol himself. At this point, Rich, though, Irvine's going to have to pray for a wipe or something disastrous to happen on Cal, because right now they're behind on death differential and well behind on the Helya fight themselves. So if Cal has any slip up here in this first portion of the second phase, which lasts 1 minute, prior to Helya going down for 20 seconds in their submerged phase, then they might have a chance at winning this. But right now, Helya needs to get to around 70.5%, 70% on your screen at home in order to win the rest of this match.
A big thing is we actually talk about the submerge sometimes being that break point. We're going to see a nice middle breath come down here. Everybody going to be able to get out of it. But actually, Baldy going to go down here. Baldy been getting hit by quite a few mechanics recently. Will they be able to get Baldy up with a battle res? This could slow them down enough because Helya has already been engaged by Irvine. They may actually start to get additional submerge phases. So if they get those, that's so much time added.
Right, you are in quite a hairy situation here with Baldy going down. Unfortunately, as you alluded to, Rich, I'm not sure if they're going to have enough DPS to avoid that second submerge phase. Helya, proving that she has quite the breath in front, will be able to submerge for a full 20 seconds underwater, holding that breath while players will need to dodge those tentacles coming up. We can see, of course, Irvine right now working in that first phase, making sure they kill those first 6 tentacles. Here's the third breath of 3 in this top phase of Cal prior to her submerge phase. And Rich, of course, we do know that in that submerge phase, if players hide in those top and right corners where you can see some of those swirlies happening right now, they will generally be safe from those emerging tentacles.
Yeah, on the top left portion of your screen, that is really good positioning. It is very easy to move there. And I really do like that position coming out from a Wapple frag. But the main thing is Baldy going down could be enough to cost them. We do still see Irvine Valley working on their tentacles, but if Helya comes down here by Cal, they should be able to take this one, take this elimination match, let out a final breath of joy and a nice Helya.
Hell yeah. Let out a breath, unlike the one that she's currently doing on the ship, where that is poisonous and will kill you immediately. Irvine Valley now working on their phase 2 start. They're going to have to pray here that not, of course, a wipe would be great for Cal in the favor of Irvine, but at least Helya must have one more submerge phase. She's right now at 70, about to be 73%, as you see at home on the screen. Here's another breath. She will likely, Rich, I think, be having another submerge phase, buying Irvine another 20 seconds, but I'm really not sure that that's going to be enough. I mean, at this point, they still have another 15-second death differential that they need to make up.
Yeah, that 15 seconds too, you can pretty much equate that to what one submerge will cost Cal. So that pretty much makes them even in that regard, but you can see how much additional damage Irvine has been able to pick up because they have all their DPS alive, and we already know that they do make NP go for a more single target focused build. So the amount of damage he's been able to get out has been absurd. All of a sudden we already see Helya at 76% for them, Helya at 72%. Here's this additional down. My goodness, in the submerge phase as well. Balance going to fall. Now they need to do it all on the back of just one DPS. They only have the Holy Trinity left, and there's 2% that they need to chop through. That's going to be an additional 5 seconds on the board as well, making them that much closer. Irvine Valley now inside of this submerge. The second that Helya pops up, they should be able to do that 4% without a problem. This 2% is going to take forever here for Cal.
They only have Leander, Cell, and Wapple desperately trying to get some form of rats in the boss. Rakana doing absolutely as much damage as possible. Access to Helya again has been given to Irvine Valley. TT getting very low there, but manages to hang on. They missed the interrupt, unfortunately. Nobody dies over on Cal's side, and she does go down in the end. So the victory will be claimed by Cal, but ooh, I mean, they did that one by a hair with no favor to Baldy.
Sloot, it is time to show me the loot, because Cal going to be able to get that chest, get Helya down, and now they are going to progress in this tournament. Sadly, Irvine will be going home, but man, did they put on a show for us here at the Great Collegiate Dungeon Race.
I mean, that was an exciting match.
Whew,